By the time I realized I was being pushed out of my own home, the walls already felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. They stared back with a cold, unfamiliar indifference, as if whispering over and over, "You were only ever passing through. You never truly belonged here." Not really. I'd found this apartment 2 years earlier, in the raw, jagged months after my mother's death. She'd gone quickly, aneurysm, they said. One moment she was laughing on the phone with me about a ridiculous recipe she'd found, the next, she was gone. No warning. No final conversation. Just an empty house full of her things, the faded apron hanging on the pantry door, the half-finished crossword on the kitchen table, the garden we'd planted together wilting without her careful hands. I couldn't stay in that house. Every corner held her ghost. So I packed what I could bear to keep. Her favorite teapot, a photo album, the soft wool blanket she'd knitted during long winter evenings, and I left. I scoured listings for weeks until I walked into this small, sunlit two-bedroom with its creaky hardwood floors, high ceilings, and a wide window overlooking a maple tree that exploded into fiery red every autumn. The moment I stepped inside, something in my chest unclenched. It felt like possibility. Like safety. Like a place where I could finally breathe again. I signed the lease that same day, hands trembling as I handed over the deposit I'd scraped together from freelance gigs and what was left of Mom's small life insurance. Then I poured every ounce of myself into making it a home. I painted the living room walls a soft sage green, the exact shade of the herbs we used to grow in her backyard garden. I spent weekends thrifting, the deep blue velvet armchair I'd curl up in with tea and a book when grief hit like a sudden storm. The sturdy oak bookshelf I assembled alone on a rainy Sunday, measuring twice, cursing under my breath, then standing back to admire it with a swell of pride I hadn't felt in months. I hung string lights along the crown molding for warmth on dark nights. I filled every windowsill with plants of ferns, pothos, a stubborn little ficus that reminded me of the one Mom babied through multiple near-deaths. This apartment wasn't just walls and a roof. It was evidence. Proof that I could survive the worst thing imaginable. Proof that I could build something beautiful out of wreckage. Every small choice, the mismatched mugs, the woven rug, the framed photo of Mom and me at the beach when I was 10, was an act of defiance against the emptiness she'd left behind. That's why, 6 months later, when rent spiked and I was barely covering the full amount on my yoga instructor salary, I let Jade move in. I'd always been the caretaker. The one who smoothed over arguments at family dinners, who stayed late to clean up after parties, who made sure everyone else felt okay even when I was falling apart inside. Mom used to call it my big heart. I think now it was fear that if I wasn't useful, wasn't kind, wasn't accommodating, people would leave. And after losing her, that fear sharpened into something desperate. Jade seemed harmless enough. We'd met at a friend's dinner party. She was bright, quick to laugh, full of stories about her travels and her art. When she mentioned needing a new place, I heard myself offering the second bedroom before I could second-guess it. This could be good, I told myself as I handed her a key. Someone to split bills with. Someone to come home to. Someone who might become family, the chosen kind Mom always talked about. I was lonely. Bone-deep lonely. Grief had hollowed me out, and I kept trying to fill the void with generosity, with helpfulness, with anything that might make the silence less deafening. So when Jade appeared in the hallway one evening clutching that faded pink roller suitcase, smiling like she was delivering good news instead of a complication, I wasn't surprised when she asked if her friend Lena could crash for a little while. I saw my own desperation reflected in the request, the need for a soft place to land. I thought of Mom watching me, proud of how I opened my heart. I thought of how I'd needed grace after her death, how friends had let me sleep on their couches while I cried myself empty. Pay it forward, I told myself. Good people help each other. What's a little while? I finally asked, voice small. Just until she gets back on her feet, Jade said breezily. A few weeks, tops. She's going through a rough breakup. I nodded. Because saying no would have meant admitting I was tired of being the giver. Because turning her away would have meant confronting how fragile my own recovery still was. Because I still believed, despite all evidence, that kindness was a shield. Lena arrived that night like a hurricane in human form, 3 bulging duffels, a battered guitar case slung over her shoulder, patchily trailing behind her like smoke. She hugged Jade fiercely, then offered me a quick, appraising nod and a thanks for letting me stay that felt more like a statement than gratitude. She was already moving past me, surveying the living room with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to ask twice. Letting her stay, I repeated silently as I closed the door. As if this isn't my home too. As if I have any real say anymore. The plan was the couch. Just the couch. Temporary. The first month, I clung to patience like a lifeline. I tiptoed around her sleeping form in the mornings, stepping over scattered clothes and empty coffee mugs. I scrubbed her rings from the sink without complaint. I wore noise-canceling headphones at 2 a.m. when she sang breathy, off-key covers into her phone, Jade giggling along in the background. She's an artist, Jade would say whenever I dared mention the chaos. Creativity needs space to breathe. And what about my space? I'd think, biting my tongue. What about my need to breathe? But I stayed quiet. It's temporary, I repeated like a prayer. This will pass. Good people remember kindness. They don't. By the second month, the living room had been fully reorganized around Lena's energy flow. My velvet armchair disappeared beneath piles of her tie-dye fabrics. My carefully tended plants were relocated to make room for her altar. Crystals glinting in the sunlight, incense ash dusting every surface, tarot cards spread like a permanent game. I stood in the kitchen one evening staring at the transformation and felt something inside me crack. When did this stop being my sanctuary? When did my home become a hostel? In the third month, an easel appeared in the dining nook. Then canvases leaning against my bookshelf. Paint fumes seeped into the air, mixing with incense until the entire apartment smelled like someone else's life. I came home from a 12-hour shift, feet aching, head throbbing, to find drop cloths permanently staining the hardwood I'd refinished with such care the year before. This isn't temporary, I realized, panic fluttering in my chest. This is conquest. The fourth month brought mail. Official envelopes addressed to Lena. Bank statements. A magazine subscription. A voter registration confirmation. I held one up with shaking fingers. You didn't ask me. Jade didn't even look away from her phone. It's not a big deal. She's been here a while. 4 months, I said, voice cracking. 4 months without contributing a single dollar. She's my guest, Jade replied, as though the word carried more weight than my lease, my payments, my grief-soaked history in these walls. Guests leave, I whispered. Jade sighed. That familiar, exasperated sigh that made me feel small. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. The word lodged in my throat like broken glass. Am I dramatic for wanting the home I built to stay mine? For wanting basic respect in the space I pay for, it became the refrain in my head every time I retreated to my room, door locked, headphones on, pretending I wasn't slowly disappearing. Conversations hushed when I entered a room. Invitations to movie nights stopped entirely. Lena began calling it our place in casual conversation, the pronouns sliding out effortlessly, excluding me without effort. Jade never corrected her. Our place, the phrase cut deeper each time I heard it. I'd lie awake at night replaying every moment I'd said yes when I should have said no, every boundary I'd failed to draw. Why do I make myself so easy to erase? One night, needing water, I paused outside the kitchen and heard them clearly. I just don't think she fits the vibe anymore, Lena said, voice low and conspiratorial, like they were discussing a throw pillow that clashed with the decor. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I might collapse. Jade made a soft sound of agreement. Yeah. And honestly, you've been here way more than she has lately. It feels like your space too. My space, the words were knives. I pay for this space. I bled for this space. I rebuilt my life inside these walls after the worst loss imaginable. Tears burned hot down my cheeks as I stood frozen in the hallway, hand pressed to the wall for balance. They're planning my removal like I'm an inconvenience. Like I'm furniture they've outgrown. 2 weeks later, the paper appeared on the counter. Roommate change agreement. My name highlighted in aggressive yellow. Jade found me staring at it that evening. Lena hovered behind her, arms crossed, wearing that small, satisfied smile of someone who'd finally won without ever playing fair. We think it's best if you move out by the end of the month, Jade said softly, as if delivering bad news about a distant relative. Why? The question came out raw, cracked open. Jade shrugged. The dynamic just isn't working. Dynamic. As if we were a failed social experiment instead of one person carrying the financial weight while 2 others redecorated around her absence. I pay rent, I said, voice rising despite my best efforts. On time. Every month. Without fail. She doesn't. Lena finally spoke, tone syrupy with condescension. Money isn't everything. It is when it's mine, I snapped, anger surging past the fear at last. When it's the only reason any of us have a roof. Jade's face hardened. You're being hostile. Hostile. For refusing to vanish quietly. For daring to claim the space I'd earned through sweat and grief and relentless responsibility. That night, I lay in bed listening to their laughter drift down the hallway, bright, careless, victorious, and felt the apartment itself reject me. The sage green walls I'd painted with hope now seemed to mock me. The string lights twinkled over someone else's altar. Every surface bore fingerprints that weren't mine. This isn't about fairness, I realized as tears soaked my pillow for the 100th night in a row. It never was. It's about power. About who bends and who breaks. I bent until I broke, and now they're sweeping up the pieces. Packing took 3 agonizing weeks. I did it in silence, folding clothes into boxes while they watched TV 6 feet away, pretending not to notice the growing stack of cardboard memorials to my life here. Each item I wrapped felt like burying another piece of myself. The mug Mom gave me for my college graduation, the blanket I'd curled under during panic attacks after her funeral, the plants I'd nurtured back from the brink the way I'd tried to nurture myself. The apartment filled the empty spaces almost instantly with Lena's things, canvases, crystals, clothes draped like flags of occupation. It was as if the rooms themselves exhaled me out, relieved to be rid of the weight of my history. On my last day, I paused in the doorway for one final look. My velvet armchair was gone entirely, replaced by a futon Lena had manifested from somewhere. The bookshelf I'd built sagged under her art supplies. The maple tree outside the window still stood sentinel, but even its leaves seemed foreign now. I built this home to survive losing everything, I thought, throat burning. And I lost it anyway. Jade offered a stiff, obligatory hug at the door. No hard feelings, okay? No hard feelings? Rage and grief twisted together until I could barely breathe. You took the one safe place I had left. You taught me that my kindness was only ever weakness in disguise. And you want absolution? Lena lifted a hand in lazy farewell. Good luck out there. I walked down the stairs without a word, boxes cutting into my palms, heart raw and strangely, terrifyingly light. The evening air tasted clean for the first time in months. 3 months later, I was settled in my new studio apartment, smaller, quieter, paid for entirely by me. The walls were still bare, but they were mine. One perfect second-hand armchair sat by the window. One resilient ficus thrived on the sill. One mug on the counter. Simple. Unapologetic. My phone buzzed one night as I sat curled up with tea. Jade, hey, random question. Do you know how to break a lease without penalties? A long pause. Then. Things with Lena didn't work out. She stopped paying for stuff she promised to cover. And now she won't leave. It's been awkward. Any advice? I stared at the screen until the words blurred with unshed tears, not of sorrow this time, but of something darker. Vindication. Recognition. The bitter satisfaction of watching the cycle complete itself. Now you know, I thought. Now you feel it, the slow erosion of your home, your safety, yourself. The realization that the person you opened your door to never intended to leave. The helplessness of watching someone else claim what you built. I pictured Jade standing in the sage-green living room I'd painted, clutching her phone the way I once had, finally understanding the cost of unchecked generosity. Do I owe her compassion? After everything? I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another, honest, sharp, cathartic. Deleted that too. In the end, I set the phone face down on the table and let silence be my answer. For the first time since my mother's death, I chose myself without apology. Without explanation. Without leaving the door cracked open for someone who'd only ever taken. No more paying the price for other people's comfort. No more shrinking to fit someone else's vision of the vibe. The walls of my little studio, bare, quiet, unbroken, held me gently that night, as if to say, you made it. You're here. You're safe. And for the first time in years, I believed them. This fierce, solitary peace wasn't emptiness. It was home. The kind no one could take from me again.